All right, it was May of 2010. Betty and I were down in Costa Rica for the dedication of a church in Chuquirique that our team had built earlier that year. We had come down here with 4 others from our building team who also wanted to join in the dedication. We arrived on Wednesday afternoon, rented a car, and were staying with Reynard Vargas, the man who had planted this church group. His home was about 2 miles from the church sanctuary by the way of the crow flies, but much longer with the twists and the turns of the mountain roads. On Friday morning, after visiting the church and helping to get everything ready for the next morning, we headed back to Reynard's home, enjoying the beauty of the mountains and the hibiscus along the road. Now, to get to Reynard's home, there are 2 ways: the safe, boring way or the exciting way. The safe way was to follow the main road as it went down, back and forth down the side of the mountain. Get to the bottom, make a right turn over the river, and head back up the other side of the mountain. Back and forth. All right. The exciting way was a very sharp right-hand turn at the top of the mountain and following the road straight down along the side of the mountain, cross the bridge over the river at the bottom, and head back up. All right. The sharp turn is right there where you see that building right there. And when you made that right turn, the road went like this. The sharp turn, the road went like this. So when you come around the corner, you were immediately going downhill. All right, next slide. All right, another slide. All right, now the sharp turn is right up there in that corner there. This is the road that went down over the river, and then Reynard's house was right there. All right. Next one. And this is a full view. That's that turn there. That big white building you see up there in that corner, just across the road from that is where we did the church building. Okay? And there is the Adventist church that we built right there. Okay? How was that? All right, go ahead. All right, and this is, all right. As we are coming to the exciting way, Betty decides that the fastest way to the house is that exciting turn. So she made the turn to go down that way. She also wanted to prove she wasn't afraid to cross that old bridge. Unfortunately, there were cars coming up the mountain in the opposite direction, the safe way, and she could not make a wide enough turn to make it all the way around the turn going down. So we find ourselves looking over the edge of the road down the side of a mountain. Not a very good position to be in. But I need to tell you how it was that Betty and I got here in the first place. It was the fall of 1999. Betty and I had gone up to the Great Lakes Adventist Academy the first part of October for Alumni Weekend. It was a beautiful Sabbath. And during the church service, an invitation was given that if the alumni had a chance, they might want to walk where the new camp grounds were being prepared for the resumption of the Michigan camp meeting the following summer. Some of the new cabins had just been completed, and they thought it might be a good thing for the guests to see. Well, as I said, it was a beautiful, warm October day. So Betty and I walked up to the hills of the campgrounds. They had a couple of the cabins done, but not much else to impress us. As we were looking around, we noticed one of the cabins was open for viewing, so we walked into the cabin and were welcomed by some of the people involved with getting the camp meeting ready. Now, as most of you know, I've been a bricklayer my whole life and had a belt buckle with a bricklayer's trowel on it. When one of the pastors, Elder Don Williams, saw it, he asked, "Are you a bricklayer?" I confirmed that I was, and his next words, "We need to talk. We need some bathrooms built. Can we talk after Sabbath?" I gave them my phone number, and the next day someone called. Could they come and talk to us at our house. Okay. We made plans for them to come that Tuesday evening. Betty prepared a meal for the couple that came, and as we sat there eating, they told me how there were 2 bathrooms that needed to be built before the upcoming camp meeting the next summer. They showed me the blueprints, and we talked it over. They really needed to keep the costs down. Could I volunteer to build them? Michigan camp meetings are very near and dear to me. As you know, we were raised right next to the First Michigan Seventh-day Adventist camp meeting at Wright, Michigan. It was held on the Ephraim Root Farm, as we all know, right over there, which is just behind the land that Betty and I own. Now, I know a lot of people in the building trades. We might be able to get them to help also. So we agreed to build them, but we needed a place to stay with our trailer. Not a problem. We could put our trailer on the hill next to one of the bathrooms to be built. We would have water from one of the cabins that we could use, electricity from the panel, and an outhouse. Very primitive, to say the least. The next Sunday, we pulled our old trailer up to the site and started working on the buildings. Betty and I worked on them every Sunday. We would drive up on Saturday night with our 2 girls, my younger brother, David, and our 2 Welsh Corgi dogs. Turn the heat on in the trailer when we got there, get up early the next morning and start working. We also had another helper, Vasil, a man from the Ukraine that lived in the area that worked with us. Sunday after Sunday, we were on the project. Not once were we ever snowed out, all winter long. It was never so cold that we could not shelter. We would work from sun up to sundown and head back home. We finished the bathrooms on Memorial Day, and they were ready for camp meeting. God is good. Well, then those in charge came to me again. We have the floor ready for another bathroom. Could you build that one also? Well, things had changed a little for us. We now have one girl going to school in Grand Rapids Junior Academy and another one at Great Lakes Adventist Academy. We can't afford to do it for free. We need to be compensated for it. Otherwise, we'll just have to do side jobs at home to help pay for their tuitions. I don't have time to do both. They thought it over and agreed. They were still getting 3 bathrooms for the price of 1. So once again, we brought our trailer back. This time we had a campsite with real bathrooms to use. We started the bathroom during camp meeting, being assisted by some of the volunteers who were spending their time at camp meeting also. Quite a bit was accomplished that week, but there was still much to do. Once again, every Saturday night we would travel up. This time we were building during the summer, giving us longer days to work on Sundays. School started. Crystal was a sophomore at Great Lakes Adventist Academy. Lynn, an 8th grader at Grand Rapids Junior Academy. One day Crystal called to tell us about a mission trip the school was going to go to do in Costa Rica. She was wondering if she could go. We told her we would love for her to go, but it's not in our budget right now. She asked, well, can I just go to the meeting on Sunday and listen? Yeah, it's not going to hurt for her to do there and learn how she might be able to plan and raise money for the next year if they went again. So that Sunday, she went to the meeting, and we worked in the bathrooms out back in the campground. The leader of the mission team had told everyone that they really needed to have a parent come if they were interested. When he asked Crystal where your parents were, she told him, they're out at the camp meeting site building the bathroom. His comment, we need to talk. So after the meeting was over, he came over to the campground. It seemed that they were going to build an education and evangelism center down in Upala, Costa Rica. It is the largest of the structures that Maranatha built, with classrooms on each side and a center sanctuary that can seat as many as 500 people. It's thousands of blocks, and they did not have any block layers coming yet. They were planning a 3-week trip with buildings, vacation Bible school, evangelistic meetings, and medical. Half of the group would go the first week. The second half would come the second week. The first group would leave after the second week. And then the rest of us would come home on the third week. The middle week, there'd be 90 volunteers. Sounded interesting, but we were trying to keep our girls in school. And right now, that is where we are focusing our funds. Well, he said, would it help if we sponsored you to go? This is tempting, but I'm not going without Crystal. This was her dream, not mine, although I've always wanted to go on a mission trip. Then he says, we will help her also. Wow, I really have to make a decision. Crystal, how bad do you want to go? She says, I would love to go, but if we can't afford it, I can wait. Let me talk to Mom. We decided that it would be a good bonding experience for us. And Betty says, you should go. Crystal and I applied for our passports and start making plans. As Crystal and I are making plans, though, Betty and Lynn feel left out. So they talk to the leader and ask if they could raise the funds, could they also go? Yeah, he says. So they start a letter writing campaign. Once again, God is very good, and saw fit that they also should be able to experience this trip. They also applied for their passports. I was going for the full 3 weeks. I would leave just before Christmas and would not be back until the new year. Without a block layer, there was no one to really show the youth how to lay block. On a Wednesday night, December 10th, the bus from Great Lakes Adventist Academy picked me up at Grand Rapids, and we headed on our way to Chicago. We arrived at the airport before the gates even opened. So we all brought our two 70-pound bags into the terminal. Yeah, back in those days, you get two 70-pounders. And it didn't cost you anything extra. We put them in a pile and used them as a pillow to get some rest sleeping on the floor. We had one layover on the way down, but arrived in Costa Rica on Thursday afternoon, tired and hungry. A bus was there to meet us, and they also rented a car. After getting some food at Taco Bell, we were on our way to the town of Upala. Night fell as we were traveling. The rented car's headlights did not work, so they had to stay close behind the bus on the roads as we were zigzagging up and down the mountains. When we arrived, the kids and many of the adults were going to stay in a school. Some of the rest of us in area hotels. Now let me tell you about my hotel room. It was 2 rooms. One room was just big enough for a single bed with 1 sheet and 1 pillow, a chair and a small table. The other room, the bathroom, had a toilet, a shower, and lizards. The next morning was Friday.
Still working.
A
Sorry,
day.
I'm having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
Siri's talking to me? Thank you, Siri. Goodbye. The next morning was Friday, a day to move the piles of blocks from the side of the road onto the floor of the future building. The building site is on the edge of the rainforest here. All the buildings have metal roofs. So as we are working, we can hear the rain just coming our direction and the roofs of the buildings. Most of the nationals, they would run for cover under tarps and sheets of plywood. All of us Americans who had just left the 40-degree weather of Michigan were overheating in the humidity, so we just would stand there and let the rain cool us off. They thought that was pretty funny. They would laugh at us, but they couldn't understand the circumstances and the temperature change we were experiencing. The second week, the rest of the group showed up with Betty, and the girls included. Betty came to stay with me in the hotel, still with 1 single bed, 1 sheet, 1 pillow, and also my lizard friends. By the end of the 3rd week, we had just about finished the block building, but the church did not have a roof. It had been caught at the border in Panama. It never arrived. On Sabbath, my dream had always been to be able to worship with the members of the new church. When we woke up in the morning, it was raining. It continued to rain all through Sabbath school as we met in the municipal building where we had also held our nightly evangelistic meetings. Just as we finished Sabbath school, it quit raining. The decision was made to move all the benches down to the church building about a quarter of a mile away. So a long line of youth put the benches and chairs on their shoulders, and we made the trek there. Now, it did not rain, well, maybe not big drops, but we did get quite a bit of dampness. But we were able to have the church service outdoors and later a baptism that afternoon. Our translator was a man by the name of Manuel. He had lived for a time in the United States, but was now working and living in Costa Rica. We became good friends, and he asked if Betty and I could spend the last weekend at his family home, looking at his church building, wondering if maybe I could come back sometime and help with the building project there. I had to tell him that I had made a commitment to the Upala mission trip and could not leave. Besides, I really wanted to worship in the new building. He understood. And when we left that Saturday night to head back to the airport, he was there with his wife and daughter to wish us well and give the girls, Betty and I, hugs goodbye. I was hooked on short-term mission work. We would start going on mission trips with another team from the Detroit Metro Church every other year. Dominican Republic, Peru, Ecuador. Meeting Manuel again on 2 of those trips. Also included was the United States and Michigan mission projects. Building the outdoor bathrooms at the North Camp for the Pathfinders at Camp Sabo. Building the foundation for the visitor center at the Higher Medicine Farm in New York. Coming back again to build the foundation for the cooler at the Camp Sabo main camp. Mission work is fun and interesting. One day I received a call. When I answered the phone, I heard a voice, "Brother Don, this is Manuel." He always called me Brother Don. We chatted for a few minutes about our families, his wife and daughter, Carolina, and my family, Betty, Crystal, and Lynn. After a few minutes, he came to the point. "Brother Don, we have a church plant in Costa Rica that is looking to purchase some land for a church. They're very poor people and don't have money to buy it for themselves. Is there any way that you could help us with some money?" At that time, Betty and I were breeding Welsh Corgi dogs. Our male was Spanky, the female Darla. We talked it over and I called Manuel back a little later and told him that our female was pregnant. When she had the puppies, we would donate the proceeds from that litter of puppies for the church land. He thanked us, not knowing how much money that would even be, but thankful for anything we could do to help. Well, Darla had 8 puppies. We still had to sell them and would not have the money for at least 8 weeks when they were ready to go to their new homes. At the end of the 8 weeks, though, the puppies were gone, and we were able to send quite a sum of money to help buy the land. We met Manuel again on our trip to Chile in 2008. This was our first mission trip that Betty and I were in leaders, and Manuel was once again a great asset putting together this trip for Maranatha. I had all but forgotten the land in Costa Rica, as this trip was an adventure in itself. That's another story for another time. We had now started to do mission work trips every year. One with the group that were going from Detroit Metro, another with our home church. 2 years later, Betty and I were working on putting together a second mission trip. This time would be to Mexico in 2010. Things were just not working out with Maranatha for us and the trip. It was coming to the end, coming to the time when we were either going to have to cancel or do something else. One Sunday morning, I was sitting at my desk in the office when the phone rang. I answered it, and the first thing I heard was, "Brother Don, it is time to build the puppy church." This is what the church was called, the land that the puppies bought. Was this the answer to why the plans with Maranatha were not working out? We did not know, but our plans changed instantly. We contacted the rest of the team and told them the change, and they were all excited that we were still going on a mission trip. There was one problem, though. We needed to raise the money for the church building. It was early October. The trip is leaving the first week of February. This is not a Maranatha-funded church, so we are in charge of raising the money. We started a fundraising campaign. The goal was $25,000. We had only 4 months to raise it. The money started to come in. One man that we had gone on many mission trips before with could not go with us, but sent us a $10,000 donation. Before we knew it, we had exceeded our goal and had raised $35,000. Betty went down on the pre-trip. Manuel met her at the San Jose airport. She would meet Rainer Vargas, the man who had planted the church, as soon as they arrived at the site. On this trip, Betty would make sure that the building site was ready. She would find us lodging. The lodge was not even completed yet. She would also look for excursions for Sabbath afternoons, and some we could do after the building was up. This is one of our Sabbath afternoon ones. And this is one of our after. Now, I had just lost my mother about 2 months before we were to go, and Dad was not in good health. Should we go? Betty went to talk to Dad and told him, Dad, if you don't want us to go, we will not go. His reply are, you are the leaders, you need to go. Before we left, Betty told her mom, I'm going to give you Manuel's phone number. Do not call it unless something happens to Dad. When we got to Costa Rica, we were building right next to the structure that the members had been using as a church. It was a few 2x4s, a metal roof, and plastic full of holes along the side. It did not even keep the rain from getting them wet during the services, but the church was growing. We built a sanctuary with 2 rooms in the back and a baptismal tank in the platform. By the second Sabbath, the building was up and dry. Now, we had one member of the team, Doug, that was not a baptized member of the church. He had been attending church for about a year and really wanted to go on this trip. Things were not working out for him to go, but eventually he was able to join us, and that Sabbath, he became the first person to be baptized in that baptismal tank. What a special day it was turning out to be. But then, as was custom, someone, usually a leader from the building team, would have the sermon. As it was not customary for a woman to have a sermon, Betty, it fell to me to have the sermon. I had never given a sermon before. This was going to be a new experience. Manuel was going to translate. As I finished my first sermon ever, we were just getting off the platform, Manuel's phone rang. He answered it. It was Betty's mom. Betty had already told Manuel that her mother would only call if something happened to Dad. He handed the phone to Betty and told her, Betty, it's your mom. You know what that means. My dad had died during my sermon. Those in attendance allowed Betty and I to go into one of the back rooms to collect ourselves, and then they came in. Even though they did not speak English or Spanish, we could feel the heartfelt love for us. I did not cry. I did not when my mother had died a couple of months earlier. How can I cry when I know that the next face they see is Jesus? They sleep in the grave. Their earthly pain is done. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. Ecclesiastes 9:5. We still have almost a week before we head home. My older brother told us Randy, as you can see, this sermon was prepared for someplace else. Randy told us just to continue with the trip. The funeral can wait until we get home. The next day is Valentine's Day. We take a day trip around the area by bus. The day after that, we take a zip line trip with the group. It is good to take our minds off of what awaits us when we get home. The members of the church made us these little gift bags as a thank you. The funeral is about a week after we get home. 3 months later, we are invited to go back to Costa Rica for the dedication of the puppy church. We have never had the opportunity before to return for the dedication of a church we have helped build. We decided to go. Now, we go back to our earlier story. When we arrived at the airport at San Jose, Betty and I rented a car from a worldwide car rental agency. As we were signing the paperwork, they asked us what insurance plan we wanted. We finally chose a plan that no matter what happened to the car, our liability was only $1,000. We spent all day Thursday and Friday morning at the church, going around town purchasing things for the church. The building looks very nice, and members are still finishing up the small things that need to be finished. But now, we are sitting on the edge of the mountain. As Betty shifts into reverse and lets off the clutch, instead of going backwards, we roll forward, off the edge of the road, and start going down the side of the mountain. The mountain is very steep. The river below, about 125 feet. We cannot see what is ahead of us as we are going through the brush that is smaller than the hood of a car. We bump into a small tree on the driver's side of the car. It pushes us a little to the left, or to the right. We hit another tree on the driver's side. It pushes us farther to the right. Each time pushing us just a little bit farther. I can't even tell you if we were quiet or people were screaming. All I could think about is, how is this going to end? We can't see. It is just small trees being mowed down in front of us. Suddenly, we jump off a little cliff and we slammed straight down and come to a stop. We all sat there momentarily, stunned. Betty was in the driver's seat. When she tried to open her door, it was right against a huge rock. Darla, one of those who came back down with us, was sitting in the passenger seat. When she opened her door, it was a drop down to the river below. The same with Phyllis, the other lady who had come down with us and was sitting behind Darla. I was sitting behind Betty, and when I opened that door, there was a rock that we could get out on. The rock that we had landed on. The rock that probably saved us from serious injury or possible death. We all climbed out of the car through my door and were standing behind the vehicle taking pictures when those who had seen us go off the mountain finally make it down to us. To their amazement, we are all alive. And better yet, not even injured. They motioned to us, trying to figure out where we were hurt. We told them we weren't. We could tell that they were trying to ask, how can you not be hurt? We could just point to heaven and say, Jesus saved us. Rayner is on the rescue squad. He's still working at the church when he gets a call that a carload of Americans had just gone off the side of the mountain. Right away, he knows it is us. He rushes to where we are. We are now standing on the road above the car with many of the nationals. Those that had seen us go over the edge and those that had stopped to see what was going on. After checking us all out and finding we are all right, although my blood pressure was a little high from having climbed back up the mountain twice, he tells us in broken English there have been 6 other accidents in the same place. In all of them, the occupants of the car had either been killed or seriously injured. We are brought back to Rayner's home. We are staying. After lunch, a young man comes running to the house and tells us people are stealing parts off the car and we should guard it until it can be pulled up out of the mountain and removed from the scene. So I make the trek back to the site and down the mountain to guard the car. In the meantime, Manuel says, Betty, you need to call your bank and close all your accounts. Why? You just need to do it. So would you know it, Betty actually knows our bank branch number by heart and also knows one of the tellers, and the teller knows here, so she calls. She tells Susie, the teller, what had happened and what we had been advised to do. Susie says, they've already hit your bank account for $6,000. What? We have insurance, and they have not even seen the car. Susie closes everything and then tells Betty, if they don't post anything within 3 days, it will drop off. We get together and have another prayer. Just before sunset, they come to remove the car. By the time they get it hooked up to the wrecker, it is dark. They don't have radios and cannot see the car from the road down to where it is. So as they're pulling it up, someone had to shout instructions from the car to the wrecker operator. This causes almost as much damage to the car as we did going down the mountain. Because as they're pulling it up, it's coming up under those trees that we had sideswiped on the way down. By the time the message gets up to the operator to stop, the back of the car is being smashed against the trees. It finally makes it to the top, and we can view all the damage. Not a pretty sight. The next day, the church was packed for the dedication service. The president of the Costa Rican mission had the sermon that day. I think many people had heard about the accident and came to see if it was true. The impact of how close we came to death did not hit me until about 2 weeks later. Then it hit me like a Mack truck. We should not have survived this accident, let alone not been hurt. God must have had a plan for us that we did not know about at that time. We were saved by the rock, the solid rock. Betty had to go to court the following Monday. We're not sure what that was all about. Manuel did all this talking in Spanish. That night we stayed at Manuel's house in Cartago, and the following day boarded the plane back to Michigan. We did not even stop at the car rental place. Later in the week, we drove to the same car rental service at the Grand Rapids Airport, explained to them what had happened and that we owed $1,000 and had come to pay it. After looking on their computer, they informed us they did not even have a rental place at that airport, so they could not help us at all. We did up sending the money down to Manuel, and he brought it to them, as we did have a contract, and we were not going to steal from them. Have you ever chosen your own way? Have you ever wandered far from God? Have you sought to feast upon the fruits of transgression only to find them turn to ashes upon your lips? And now your life plans thwarted and your hopes dead? Do you sit alone and desolate? That voice which has been speaking to your heart, but to which you have not listened, come to you distinct and clear. Arise and depart, for this is not your rest, because it is polluted. It shall destroy you, even with the sword's destruction. Micah 2:10. Return to your father's house. He invites you, saying, return unto me, for I have redeemed thee. Come unto me, here, and your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David. Isaiah 44:22 and 55:3. Do not listen to the enemy's suggestion to stay away from Christ until you have made yourself better, until you are good enough to come to God. If you wait until then, you will never come. When Satan points to your filthy garments, repeat the promise of the Savior. Him that cometh to me, I will in no wise cast out. Tell the enemy, the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses from sin. Make the prayer of David your own. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Psalms 51:7. We should never have survived this accident the way we did. But we need to have our lives right with God at all times. God must have had something else for us to do. Our closing song, I believe, is